You want to hear a good story? Hi, this is Garth Weber. I'm in Berkeley, California. It is June 8th, 2020, and I'm locked down. So I've been making a series of videos, uh, mostly instructional guitar stuff, but somebody suggested that I tell some Miles Davis stories. So I'm going to tell you how I met him. As I mentioned in a previous video, I met Robben Ford in 1976, and I took a few lessons from him, and then he moved to LA, and I didn't see him for a few years. In '79, I decided to move to California. I was really headed for LA, but it's 40 years now, and I haven't made it to LA yet. So I moved out here and started working as a musician, and I met, unrelated to Robben, I met his brother Mark. In fact, Mark just came up to me in a club in the middle of a set, and we're playing, and he just yells at me. He goes, "You want to join my band?" I said, "Sure." He says, "Okay, I'll see you later." He walked out of the club. so, uh, so we Mark and I had two bands together. We had the Mark Ford band, and then later we had a band we called the Blue Meanies. And so occasionally Robben would show up at one of our gigs and hang out. And so that was happening. We were playing at the Miramar Beach Inn in Half Moon Bay, and Robben was there. And we were sitting at a table, he and I across from each other, and he said, "Hey Garth, would you be," now he was, at the time, was playing with Miles. He said, "Would you be interested in the Miles Davis gig?" And I thought for a second, and I was thinking, okay, there's probably a punchline coming, but I decided to just play it safe. I said, "I would be interested, yes." And he says, "Okay." And I forgot all about it, but I thought, well, isn't that nice that Robben would would say that to me? I mean, it made me feel really good to think that he would consider me an appropriate choice for the guitar chair in the band. So a few months went by, and I got a call from Robben, and he was on the road in, I believe it was Italy, and he said, "Here's what you need to do." He says, "Are you still interested in the Miles Davis gig?" I said, "Of course." I said, "You're serious about this?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, well," he says, "here's what you have to do. You need to make a tape of your own playing, and it cannot be a studio tape, because you can make stuff sound amazing in the studio when it wouldn't in a live performance. So he says it has to be live, and I need you to send it to me, FedEx it to me at this hotel. So I was playing the next night or something at the Route 66 in Burlingame, a little hole in the wall dive club, but a lot of fun, run by a kind of a nutty guy named Leon, who was just a character and really a nice guy. And so I made a tape of my gig that night, and then I took it home and I edited it down to what I thought were the best moments. The entire, I don't even remember what the entire length of what I gave him was, but I would say maybe 5 minutes tops. And I FedExed it to Robben in Italy. It missed him. A second tape missed him again in a different country. And he got back to New York. He called me up. He says, "Hey, man, I thought you were going to send me a tape." I go, "I sent you two. You didn't get them?" He goes, "Nope." And he goes, "Well, here's Miles's address." And for some reason, I'm usually not this presumptuous, but I said to Robben, I said, "No, no, no. I want you to hear it. I'll send it to you. And if you think it's good enough, you take it to Miles." That was a little cheeky on my part, I think, in retrospect. So he said, "Okay." So I sent him the tape. He listened to it. He said, "Yeah, I think it's fine." So what he told me, now this is 32 years ago, 33 years ago. So my memory, since my memory never was what it used to be, I could get some of the details wrong, but the gist of it is right. So he took it over to Miles's house, and Miles put it in his big stereo system. This is a cassette tape, of course, we're talking about. And he starts blasting it through the speakers in the room. And then out of his pocket, Miles took a little handheld recorder, and he held it up in the air, and he recorded some of the playback in the big system. And then, according to what I remember, without stopping the playback in the big system, he rewound the little recorder and held it to his ear and listened to it. Now, why he did that, I'll never know. But he said, now I'm going to do his voice a few times here, and I'll translate after I do it, because it's kind of hard to understand. But he said, "I like his drive. Get him. I like his drive. Get him." And so that was my audition. So I was called by a guy named Jim Rose, who was the road manager, And he said, okay, you've got the gig. Here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to Brazil in September, I believe it was. And he said, just make sure your passport is up to date. And I was like, oh my God, I've never had a passport. And I thought he was going to freak out on me. But he goes, okay, here's what we do. I'm going to send you an airline ticket. You take it to the passport office and they will expedite the passport. And so I did that. And sure enough, they did. Well, I had 1 day to pick up the passport. And that was, I believe, on a Friday. And I think on the following Monday, I was to fly out to join up with the band. Well, being an idiot, I got to the passport office right at 5 o'clock. And I actually got out of my car, told my girlfriend, you drive, and I ran down Brannan Street or whatever street it was in San Francisco, and I ran up to the steps of the passport office, and the guy's turning the key and locking the door, and I yelled through the glass, I gotta get in there, I gotta get, and he just shook his head and walked away. And then I did something completely out of character for me. I walked around the building and I tried doors until I found one that wasn't locked, and I walked in the passport office and found myself behind the counter. Like that's an employee entrance, right? And I was stunned that nobody looked at me. Nobody even cast me a glance like, what are you doing behind the counter? So there was the gate, you know, where you lift it up to get out from behind the counter. So I lifted it up and I went, and there were a few people still standing in line. I got in line. I got to the front of the line and I told him who I was, and he guy rifled through these plastic tubs full of these envelopes. And he said, I don't see your passport. I said, I'm quite sure that it's ready because I called and I made sure. And he said, well, I don't see it. I said, could you please check again? So he did. He said, nope, it's not here. So I said, is there any chance it could have been filed under G rather than W for Weber? I'm going to grab a cough drop here because I feel a cough coming. And so sure enough, the passport had been misfiled under G, and so I nearly lost the gig right there. And then I flew out to New York, met up with the band. I didn't start right away. I audited 2 gigs that Robin played, Baltimore and Detroit. And we walked up to, I believe it was called Ford Hall in Detroit. That was the first of the 2 gigs that I was going to audit, which meant literally sitting on stage and listening. I was sat behind Robin's amp to listen to the set and see what he was playing and whatnot. The best seat in the house. And they kind of led me up to the back door of this hall. It was a bright day, and the door opened up, and all I could see was blackness inside the hall. And all of a sudden, this arm came out and grabbed me and pulled me into the hall. And of course, my eyes are trying to adjust. I can't see anything. I know that I'm walking down a hall and I'm holding hands with somebody. And when my eyes cleared, I looked over and I'm holding hands and walking down a hallway with Miles Davis. And he says to me, "You sound good on those tapes. You sound good on those tapes." And I don't know what I said. I have no memory of it. Was just everything was so, overwhelming. And so that's how I met Miles. Now, there was no rehearsal. There was a rehearsal of which Miles did not attend, and it was for one song that we only did like months later. So there was no rehearsal for the set. I was given a cassette tape of the 2 shows that I audited. I was put in a hotel room, and they said, learn the set. And I didn't even know the names of the songs. Okay, this is getting kind of long, so I'm going to make a break here and I'll continue.